It started subtly, a whisper at the edge of my awareness. 3 years. That's how long we'd been married. 3 years of Sunday mornings with mismatched mugs, the garden we always meant to tend, and plans scribbled in notebooks, baby names, travel destinations, a future painted with laughter lines. Sarah. Just her name used to fill me with a quiet, solid kind of joy. She was everything. Sharp, funny, the kind of woman who drew everyone in, and somehow she'd chosen me. I never felt beneath her, not once. We were a team. I was the anchor, maybe steady and predictable. She was the flame, bright, quick, always on the verge of something exciting. It worked, or it had worked, then came the promotion. Voss International, a corner office, a team of her own, a world of power suits and board meetings. I was proud, of course, thrilled even. She'd earned it, every bit of it. But something shifted. Not a sudden earthquake, but a slow, almost imperceptible tremor. The late nights started. Once a week, then twice, then 3. Just proving myself, she'd say, her voice tight but determined. Sterling Voss. His name became a constant hum in our conversations, a background noise I couldn't quite tune out. He was brilliant, ruthless, they said, and Ivy was ambitious. I didn't want to get in her way, to be the clingy husband holding her back. But it wasn't just the late nights. It was the small things, the almost invisible cracks in the foundation we'd built. She stopped cooking. I started eating alone more often, the silence at the dinner table amplified by the absence of her stories about the day, stories I used to crave, the absurd office anecdotes, the way she'd mimic her colleagues, making me feel like I was part of her world, even if I was miles away from those glass skyscrapers. Those stories, they just stopped. Like a faucet, not abruptly turned off, but slowly, agonizingly, trickling to a stop. And then there was the perfume. Lavender. That's what she always wore, a soft, calming scent that, well, it was her. It was the smell of coming home, of Sunday mornings, of everything good. One day, it was gone, replaced by something sharper, muskier, something unfamiliar, and always on Fridays. I asked her about it one evening, trying to sound casual, pretending it was just idle curiosity. Busy week, she said, her smile thin and tired. Sterling's got us working on this merger deal, lots of moving parts. I nodded, pretending that answer settled something, but it didn't. It felt like a bandage on a wound that was festering beneath. I'd worked deadlines before. I knew stress. This wasn't stress. This was distance. A politeness that felt colder than anger, like being around someone who still hugged you, but out of habit, not warmth. I told myself it was just a phase, that all couples had dry spells, that we just needed a vacation. I even suggested it, a weekend away, just us, no phones, no work. Maybe, she said, but we never picked a date. It was always later, when things calm down, when this deal closes. Excuses. I knew they were excuses, but I clung to them, desperate to believe that the woman I loved, the woman I'd built my life with, hadn't changed. Last night was different. I came home early, earlier than usual. I wanted to surprise her, maybe cook dinner, light some candles, remind us both what this marriage was built on. The house was quiet, too quiet. I called, no answer. A few minutes later, a text, still at work, don't wait up. That was it. No heart emoji, no apology, just a flat update. I stood there staring at that message, wondering when Ivy had started talking to me like a colleague. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her side of the bed cold for hours before she finally came home, slipped in without turning on the light, and whispered, "Sorry, long day." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure what I'd say if I did. That was the first time I realized I didn't know how long I'd been lying to myself. That maybe the calm I thought I was in wasn't calm at all. It was quiet erosion, a slow, undetectable shift until everything you believed in was just slightly off-center. But still, I told myself, this is marriage. It's not all fire and poetry. Sometimes it's showing up even when things feel off. Sometimes it's holding on until the storm passes. The problem was I didn't know the storm had already started, and I was the last to see the clouds. The glass doors slid open and I stepped inside. Voss International. It was imposing, all polished steel and hushed voices, a different world, a world of power and influence, a world that felt separate, separate from my world, from our world. I walked towards the reception desk, my footsteps echoing on the pristine floor. The receptionist, a woman with a practiced smile, looked up. "Can I help you?" Her voice was smooth, professional. "I'm here to see Ivy," I said, trying to sound casual, like this was a normal occurrence, a routine visit. I'm her husband." The smile didn't falter, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Curiosity, recognition. "And your name, sir?" Carter Rhodes." She typed something into her computer, her fingers moving quickly, efficiently. "I'll call her office. Please have a seat." I sat, feeling the cool leather of the chair beneath me. It was too quiet. The air hummed with a low, almost imperceptible energy, the energy of 1,000 people working, striving, competing. I felt out of place, like I didn't belong here. This wasn't mismatched mugs and Sunday mornings. This was something else entirely. Minutes ticked by. Each one felt longer than the last. I watched people walk past, their faces intent, their movements purposeful. They all seemed to know where they were going, what they were doing. I felt like I was drifting, a stranger in a strange land. The receptionist finally looked up. "Miss Rhodes is in a meeting. She'll be tied up for a while." "A meeting?" I tried to keep my voice even, but a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. "Yes, a very important meeting with Mr. Voss." That name again. Voss. It was everywhere. It hung in the air, an invisible presence. Can I leave her a message?" I asked. "Of course." She handed me a small, sleek notepad and a pen. I scribbled a quick note, trying to sound light, reassuring. "Just stopped by. Call me when you get a chance. Love you, love you." The words felt fragile suddenly. I handed the note back to the receptionist. "Thank you." As I turned to leave, I saw him, through the glass wall of a conference room, Sterling Voss. He was standing, leaning slightly toward someone I couldn't see clearly, but his posture, it was intense, focused. And then Sarah. She was there sitting at the table, her face turned towards him. She wasn't smiling, she looked, I couldn't quite place it, serious, strained, and then his hand, it moved slowly, deliberately. It wasn't a handshake, it wasn't a casual touch. It was, I couldn't even process it. It was on her leg, under the table, and then his words. I couldn't hear them, not clearly, not through the glass. But I saw his lips move, and I just knew, it was like a punch to the gut, a cold, sickening realization. The world, it tilted, everything stopped. My breath hitched, a soundless gasp that caught in my throat, a vice clamping down on my lungs. It couldn't be. My vision narrowed, the polished conference room blurring at the edges, everything focusing, sharpening into a single horrifying point. His hand, there, on her, not a friendly pat, not a casual brush. It was possessive, invasive, sliding deliberately beneath the fabric of her skirt. My mind screamed, but my body, it was frozen, glued to the spot, a statue carved from disbelief. She was there, Sarah, my Sarah. The woman whose laughter used to fill our small townhouse, the woman who knew my coffee order before I even spoke, the woman whose hand fit perfectly in mine. She was there and she wasn't moving, not away, not pushing him off. Her face, it was a mask, a tight, pale mask. I couldn't read it. Was it fear, resignation, a terrible, sickening acceptance? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of my shock. His lips moved. Words. I couldn't hear them, the glass a soundproof barrier, but I didn't need to hear them. His posture, the angle of his head, the way his eyes, they burned. Possessive, arrogant. He was claiming her, like she was an object, a prize to be won. He wasn't asking, he was stating. And those words, they echoed in my head, even though I hadn't heard them. Walk away, she's mine now or else. The sheer audacity of it, the raw, brutal possessiveness. It was a violation, not just of Sarah, but of everything we were, everything I thought we had. My blood turned to ice, then fire, a cold, numbing shock giving way to a white-hot rage, a protectiveness so fierce it threatened to consume me. 3 years. 3 years of trust, of shared dreams, of building a life together, and in that single sickening moment, it felt like it was all shattering, cracking apart like thin ice under a heavy weight. My hands clenched into fists, the nails digging into my palms. I could feel the tremor in my fingers, the desperate urge to do something, to break the glass, to drag him away from her, to make him understand. But I couldn't move. Not yet. I was still caught, trapped in that frozen moment, the image seared into my brain. His hand, her face, his words. It was a nightmare, a waking nightmare, and then finally something snapped. The paralysis broke, the shock gave way, and the rage, it took over. The door slammed open, not a gentle push, not a hesitant knock, a full force, shoulder against the glass, shattering the fragile pretense of civility. They both jerked around, faces snapping towards the intrusion. He, Sterling, his smug composure cracking, replaced by a flicker of surprise, annoyance. Her, Sarah, her eyes widening, a mixture of shock and something else. Something I couldn't quite decipher, something that twisted in my gut. "Ivy," I said, my voice raw, louder than I intended, the sound echoing in the sudden silence of the conference room. "What the hell is this?" The words ripped from me, sharp and ragged, torn from the raw edges of my disbelief. He straightened immediately, smoothing down his expensive suit, his face hardening, the CEO mask slipping back into place. "Mr. Rhodes," he said, his voice smooth, dangerously calm, "I assume this is unexpected." Unexpected? That was an understatement. That was like calling a tsunami a light drizzle. "Unexpected?" I snapped, my control fraying. "What am I doing here? What are you doing here? With her? At this hour?" He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound that grated on my already shredded nerves. "She works for me. Late hours come with the job." My hands clenched, the urge to hit him, to wipe that arrogant smirk off his face, almost overwhelming. I had to consciously unclench, to force myself to take a shallow, ragged breath. "She doesn't work for you after hours," I said, each word precise, measured, fighting to keep my voice steady. "She's my wife." He tilted his head, his eyes narrowing, assessing me. "And I'm sure she's excellent at both roles." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't a compliment. It was a challenge, a blatant, possessive claim. Her face crumpled just for a second, a fleeting glimpse of pain, of something vulnerable. Then she smoothed it out, her expression hardening, mirroring his. "Stop," she said, her voice low, barely a whisper. "Sterling, that's enough." "Now it's enough?" I rounded on her, the betrayal burning in my chest. "Oh, now it's enough? You let him talk to you like that? Touch you like that?" She looked at me, and I'll never forget the expression on her face. Not anger, not even guilt, just weariness, like a woman who'd been standing in a storm for too long, without a coat. "I didn't want this," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of my own heart. "Then why are you still here?" Silence, that thick, suffocating silence. It answered me first. Then he stepped forward, his voice smooth, oily. "This is clearly a domestic matter," he said, straightening his cufflinks. "But I'd appreciate it if you didn't barge into my office again." I wanted to hit him. God, I wanted to hit him, but I looked at her, really looked, and I realized something that hurt more than anything else. She wasn't shocked by my presence. She was prepared for it. This wasn't new. I turned. I didn't wait for her to follow, didn't ask if she'd come home. I walked away, back through that cold, echoing hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, each step a hammer blow to my already shattered composure. The elevator doors slid open, a silent invitation to escape. I stepped inside, the mirrored walls reflecting my own distorted image, eyes tired, jaw clenched, a stranger staring back at me. The descent was agonizing. Each floor a slow, deliberate drop, further away from her, further away from any semblance of understanding. The hum of the elevator, the quiet click of the numbers changing, it was the soundtrack to my world collapsing. I gripped the handrail, my knuckles white, the metal cold and unyielding beneath my touch. Outside, the rain had picked up, a steady, relentless downpour that mirrored the turmoil inside me. I didn't bother with my hood. I let it soak into my shirt, into my skin, as if the cold could somehow wash away the weight pressing down on me, the weight of his words, his touch, her silence. I climbed into the car, the familiar scent of leather and air freshener a cruel reminder of normalcy, of a life that now felt irrevocably altered. I sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring out at the blurred lights through the water on the windshield. I hadn't caught them in bed. I hadn't seen a kiss. But betrayal doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in silence. Sometimes it just looks you in the eye and doesn't say a damn word. I never wanted to be that husband, the kind who checks phones, scrolls through texts, digs through digital shadows, looking for proof that their life is a lie. But that's exactly who I became. And the truth is, it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like survival, every instinct screaming at me that something was terribly, irrevocably wrong. I started the engine, the rumble a hollow echo in the night. The wipers swished back and forth, clearing the rain, but they couldn't clear the image from my mind. His hand, her face, his voice. I drove, not home, not yet. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Away from the building, away from the lies, away from the woman I thought I knew. The city lights blurred past, streaks of color in the rain, a chaotic symphony of indifference. And I drove, lost in the labyrinth of my own shattered heart. The engine hummed, a low, persistent thrum that vibrated through the car, through me. Rain continued to lash against the windshield, each drop a tiny, relentless reminder. She was beside me, but she felt miles away. An ocean of unspoken words, of accusations and fears, stretched between us. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed straight ahead, on the road, on the blurred lights, on anything but me. I could feel her tension radiating off her, a palpable force in the confined space of the car. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to break this suffocating silence. But my hand remained still, hovering between us, paralyzed by the weight of what had happened. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. Full of questions that screamed to be asked, of explanations that I desperately needed to hear, of a pain so profound it threatened to swallow me whole. Each unsaid word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, a barrier more impenetrable than any physical wall. I glanced at her, her profile illuminated by the passing headlights. She looked small, vulnerable, and that only made the betrayal sting more. How could someone so fragile, someone I loved so deeply, be at the center of this nightmare? We drove. The familiar streets of our city, once a comfort, now felt alien, distorted. Each turn, each stoplight, was a slow, agonizing journey towards the inevitable, towards the confrontation that awaited us at home, the home that suddenly felt tainted. The radio played softly, a generic pop song, its upbeat melody a cruel mockery of the turmoil within the car. I reached out and turned it off, the sudden silence even more deafening than the music. She didn't react, didn't acknowledge the gesture, didn't even turn her head. The wipers swished back and forth, clearing the rain, but they couldn't clear the image from my mind. His hand, her face, his words. They played on a loop, a horrifying film reel projected onto the inside of my eyelids. We pulled into the driveway, the familiar sight of our small townhouse, the porch light casting a warm glow, usually a beacon of comfort and safety, now felt cold, hollow. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the storm within us raged on. I turned off the engine. The silence that followed was deafening, a silence that screamed louder than any shout, and we sat there in the dark, the rain still falling, the weight of everything crashing down on us. The front door clicked shut behind us, the sound echoing in the sudden quiet of the house. We stood there in the dim light of the hallway, two figures frozen in the aftermath of a storm. The air crackled with unspoken accusations, with a tension so thick you could almost touch it. I turned to her, my voice low, strained. "We need to talk." It wasn't a question, it was a demand. Her shoulders slumped, a visible sign of exhaustion, of defeat. She didn't meet my gaze. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. We moved into the living room, the familiar comfort of the couch, the worn rug, now alien and unsettling. She sat, a safe distance away, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. I stood, pacing restlessly, the need to move, to release the pent-up energy, overwhelming. You should have told me, Ivy, I said, my voice rising slightly, the anger simmering beneath the surface. From the first message, from the first time he crossed the line. She finally looked up, her expression a mixture of pain and defiance. I didn't want you to lose it, she said, her voice stronger now but still fragile. You don't understand the power that man has. If I'd gone to HR, they would have buried it. If I pushed too hard, he would have turned on me. And you were just going to let him... What? Keep testing the line while you tried to keep everything from falling apart? I stopped pacing, my gaze fixed on her. I was trying to survive, Carter, she snapped, her voice breaking. I stared at her. I believed her. That was the worst part. I believed every word. But I also couldn't shake the image of his hand on her shoulder, the messages laced with suggestion, the silence that had festered between us, like a wound left untreated. I would have protected you, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You know, all you had to do was tell me. I was protecting you, she retorted, standing, her voice rising, from doing something reckless, from becoming the kind of man who loses everything over someone like him. But it was too late for that. Reckless had already taken root. That night, when the house had gone quiet, and Ivy finally retreated upstairs, I didn't follow. I sat in the dark living room, staring at the fireplace we hadn't used since Christmas, thinking about all the moments I dismissed. The new perfume, the turned-over phone, the sudden excuses. They weren't just signs of guilt. They were signs of fear. She had been cornered, emotionally pinned between ambition and self-preservation. But still, she had kept me in the dark. And that betrayal had weight. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city outside. I sat there, the weight of her words pressing down on me, the implications of her fear settling like a cold stone in my stomach. Betrayal. It wasn't just his hand on her, it was the silence, the weeks, the months of unspoken truths, of carefully constructed lies. I replayed everything, every late night, every vague explanation, every averted glance. Were there signs? Signs I had missed, signs I had chosen to ignore, signs that had been screaming at me all along? My mind raced, piecing together fragments of conversations, moments of distance, the subtle shifts in her behavior. The perfume, the phone, the way she flinched when I touched her unexpectedly. Each detail, once dismissed as stress or exhaustion, now took on a sinister new meaning. A meaning that chipped away at the foundation of trust we had built. 3 years. And how much of it had been a carefully constructed facade? I thought about his words, his possessive claim. She's mine now. The arrogance of it, the sheer audacity. But beneath the arrogance there was something else. A chilling certainty. A certainty that made my blood run cold. Was it just a power play? Or was there something more? Something deeper? The questions swirled, a maelstrom of doubt and suspicion. Had she been involved in something more than just workplace harassment? The thought was a poison, seeping into my veins, corrupting every memory, every shared moment. I looked at her, at the woman I loved, the woman I had trusted with my life, and I didn't know her anymore. The familiar face, the warm smile, the quick wit. It all felt tainted, like a beautiful painting with a hidden flaw, a crack that ran deep beneath the surface. The fear gnawed at me. Not just the fear of losing her, but the fear of what I might discover. The fear of confronting a truth so devastating it could shatter everything I believed in. Was I strong enough to face it? Was our marriage strong enough to survive it? I wrestled with the urge to know, to demand answers, to dig deeper, to uncover every hidden secret. But a part of me was terrified of what I might find. A part of me wanted to cling to the illusion of our past happiness, to pretend that everything was still okay, but pretending wasn't an option anymore. The glass had shattered. The truth, however ugly, was out there, waiting to be confronted, and I couldn't run from it, not anymore. The hours crawled past, each one a slow, agonizing tick of the clock, marking the passage of time, the passage of what felt like a lifetime. Sleep was a distant memory, replaced by a relentless cycle of thoughts, of questions, of a growing, hardening resolve. I couldn't stay still. I paced the living room, the familiar space now a cage, confining my restless energy, my need to do something. The initial shock, the raw anger, had begun to solidify into a cold, focused determination. I couldn't let him get away with it. I couldn't let her continue to live in fear, to be controlled by his power, and I couldn't stand by, a passive observer, while my marriage, my life, crumbled around me. A plan began to form, a fragile, tentative outline in the chaos of my mind. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a start, a way to reclaim some semblance of control, to fight back against the darkness that had descended upon us. I needed evidence, hard, irrefutable evidence, not just my word against his, but something concrete, something that could expose his actions, his manipulation, the messages. I remembered the messages on her phone, but that wasn't enough. It was circumstantial. I needed more. I thought about the building, Voss International, the cameras. There had to be cameras, surveillance footage, footage of that hallway, of that conference room, footage that could show what I had seen, that could prove his lies, his abuse of power. I needed help. Someone who knew the system, someone who could navigate the corporate labyrinth, someone who wasn't afraid to stand up to him. A lawyer, a good one, someone who could protect Sarah, who could protect us. And Sarah, her involvement was crucial. Was she willing to fight? Was she still trapped in his web of fear? Could I trust her to stand beside me, to tell the truth, to break free from his control? I needed to talk to her, to convince her, to show her that we were stronger together. The plan took shape, each step more concrete, more determined. I would find a lawyer, I would get the footage, and I would make him pay. Not with violence, not with anger, but with the cold, hard truth. I would expose him for what he was. The next morning I woke with a sense of grim purpose. The fear was still there, the doubt still lingered, but it was overshadowed by a steely resolve. It was time to act. It was time to fight for what was ours. The room was sterile, impersonal. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the polished table, the faces around it. His face, arrogant, defiant, but with a flicker of something else now. Something less certain. Sarah was beside me, her hand trembling slightly in mine, but her gaze steady, unwavering. The lawyer spoke, her voice sharp, precise, laying out the evidence. The footage, it was there, clear, undeniable. His hand, her reaction, his words captured by a hidden microphone, the audio chillingly clear, the messages printed out, a damning trail of manipulation and control, his attempts to blur the lines, to exert his power. His composure began to crumble. The carefully constructed facade of the powerful CEO, the untouchable boss, started to crack. He tried to deny it, to dismiss it, to spin it, but the evidence was too overwhelming, too damning. Sarah spoke. Her voice, though quiet, resonated with a newfound strength, a courage I hadn't seen before. She recounted the pressure, the fear, the subtle but insidious ways he had manipulated her, made her feel trapped, made her feel like she had no choice. He shifted in his seat, his eyes darting from face to face, searching for an escape, a way out. But there was none. The walls were closing in, the consequences of his actions finally catching up to him. The questions came, sharp and relentless. His explanations, his justifications, fell apart under scrutiny, revealing the ugly truth beneath the surface. The abuse of power, the manipulation, the blatant disregard for basic human decency. He was exposed. His carefully constructed world, built on intimidation and control, was crumbling around him. The power he wielded, the influence he exerted, was finally being challenged, finally being held accountable. It wasn't a victory, not really. There were no cheers, no celebrations, just a grim satisfaction, a sense of justice finally served. The damage was done, the scars remained. But the truth was out, the silence was broken, and we were still standing, battered, bruised, but standing, together. The future remained uncertain, the path ahead unclear, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was a glimmer of hope, A chance to rebuild, to heal, to find a way forward. The reckoning had come, and it had changed everything.